Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're digging into a real head scratcher someone sent in.
Yeah, a business case study.
Exactly.
Mm.
About Google Pay seeing a surprising, 10% drop in payments over just the last couple of months.
So our job today is basically to unpack that. Figure out how you'd even start diagnosing something like that.
Right. What's the thought process? We've got this interview scenario, someone actually trying to solve it. We get to follow along.
It's like being a fly on the wall for some real-world tech problem solving. You get to see the questions they ask, the dead ends they hit.
That's why we wanted to do this deep dive. It's a look behind the curtain. Maybe you're seeing weird metrics in your own work, or maybe you're just, curious.
Yeah, how do these big companies tackle unexpected issues?
Stick with us, because the answer here is maybe not what you'd first expect. Okay, so this 10% drop in Google payments, where does the investigator in this case study even begin?
Well, the first thing is always understanding the shape of the problem. So the immediate question is, was it sudden, like overnight? Or did it creep up?
And the answer.
It was gradual, over a couple of months, which is a really key piece of information right off the bat.
How so?
Well, a sudden crash might make you think, okay, technical failure, server outage, something big broke.
Right, like a burst pipe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But a gradual decline, that slow leak, it suggests something else. Maybe user behavior changing, or a more subtle system issue building up.
Okay, so it's gradual. Then who is it affecting? Is it just like younger users?
Yeah.
Or only in certain cities?
That's the next logical step. Check demographics, check geography.
Yeah.
Nothing specific. The drop was seen across all user groups, all personas, all cities. Pretty evenly spread.
So not a localized problem. That rules out quite a bit, like a regional issue or maybe a campaign that only annoyed one group.
Precisely. It points towards something more fundamental, more widespread within the Google Pay system or its usage.
What about the tech itself? Android versus iPhone users. Sometimes things get weird on one platform.
They looked into that too. Nothing really stood out between iOS and Android. I mean, they noted Android has a bigger user base in India, which is context, but...
And not the cause of the drop.
Okay, right. Seems
Okay.
platform agnostic. So another potential easy answer crossed off the list.
Okay, so it's gradual, widespread, not device specific.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense to then look outwards, right? What's happening outside Google Pay.
Hmm.
Any big news? Bad PR.
Yep, that's the next check. Any unpopular campaigns Google Pay ran, any negative press, anything that might make people suddenly wary of using it.
And the answer was no.
Pretty much business as usual. No major PR fires or controversial campaigns that lined up with this drop.
Okay, what about timing? Could it just be
Yeah.
seasonal? People spend less after a big holiday period or something.
Good thought. They checked that against historical data, but this drop didn't match previous year's patterns.
So not the usual Q1 dip or whatever. This was new.
Exactly. It wasn't fitting the expected seasonality, which makes it more concerning, suggests it's not just a normal fluctuation.
Okay, external factors mostly ruled out. What about the elephant in the room? Competition. Did another payment app suddenly get super popular or run a massive campaign? I think PhonePe was mentioned.
Yes, definitely got to look at the competition. PhonePe did run a campaign around that time, and Google Pay did see a small dip in its number of customers.
Uh-huh. So maybe that explains it.
Well, here's the critical part. That dip in customers was tiny compared to the 10% drop in payments. And crucially, the payment drop actually started before the PhonePe campaign kicked off.
Oh, okay. So the timing doesn't quite line up and the scale is wrong.
Exactly. Competition is always there. It might have had a tiny effect on user numbers, but it doesn't explain this big 10% slide in payment volume. It seems a main issue lies elsewhere.
Right. So after checking all these external possibilities, demographics, devices, PR, seasonality, competitors, the investigator is still looking for the main reason. Where do they turn now?
Logically, they pivot inwards. If it's not external, it must be something internal to Google Pay itself or the user experience.
Makes sense. What's the first internal check?
A really basic but crucial one. Did the way they measure payments change? Did the definition of a payment shift in their analytics?
I got to make sure you're not chasing a ghost in the data.
Precisely. But no, the way they calculate payment data hadn't changed. So the 10% drop is real, not an accounting artifact.
Okay, real drop confirmed. Now what? Dig into how people actually use the app.
Exactly. Time to break down the user journey. How do people typically complete a payment with Google Pay? The investigator identified sort of three main paths.
Right. There's scanning a QR code, like at a shop or for a rickshaw.
That's a big one. Then there are payments initiated from other apps where maybe Swiggy or Zomato just passes you directly to Google Pay to complete the transaction. Pretty smooth, usually.
And the third one sounded a bit more complex. The one involving UPI payments started elsewhere.
Yeah, that's where you might start a payment in another app using UPI, but instead of seamlessly opening Google Pay, it kind of hangs. You might see that loading spinner, the wailing wheel, as it was described. And then you actually have to manually open the Google Pay app yourself and look for, like, a notification or sometimes just a little dot telling you there's a payment waiting.
That sounds
Mm.
less than ideal.
Yeah.
Potentially easy to miss.
It definitely introduces more friction than the other methods. So those are the main ways how people pay. Then the investigator looked at what kind of payments were being made.
Like, who are they paying?
Exactly. Differentiating between merchant payments paying businesses versus peer-to-peer, sending money to friends, or direct bank transfers.
And this distinction turned out to be important.
Hugely important. This is where things start to get really interesting.
Okay, lay it on us. Where is the 10% drop actually happening?
The data showed the drop was happening almost entirely in merchant payments.
Wow. Okay, not peer-to-peer.
Peer-to-peer transfers and bank transfers were stable, holding steady.
So people are still sending money to friends just fine. It's specifically when paying businesses that the volume dropped 10%.
Correct. That narrows the focus considerably. It's not a general payment issue. It's a merchant payment issue.
And what about those QR code payments to businesses? You mentioned QR codes earlier.
Right. Since peer-to-peer QR code payments were stable and the underlying tech is the same, the investigator made a reasonable assumption.
That QR code payments to merchants were probably stable too.
That was the working assumption, yes. It seems logical. So if P2P is fine and merchant QR is likely fine, that leaves.
Those other merchant payment flows, the ones initiated from other apps.
Exactly. The two main types. The seamless redirection, where the other app opens Google Pay directly.
And the clunkier one, where you have to manually open Google Pay and find the request.
Yep. So next step, analyze the success rate of that seamless flow. When Swiggy hands you off to Google Pay, are people completing the payment?
And the data showed.
Conversion rates on those payment pages were stable, no significant drop-off there.
So if someone gets to the final confirm payment screen in that smooth flow, they're generally completing it.
It seems so, which points the finger squarely at that other flow.
The one involving the wailing wheel and needing to find the request in the Google Pay app?
Precisely. The problem seemed to be concentrated there. And then comes the crucial reveal from the interviewer in the case study.
Okay, what was it?
There had been a recent product release, a change in how these payment requests are handled.
Oh, what did they change?
They actually removed SMS notifications for these payment requests, and instead they made in-app notifications, these little widgets or pop-ups within the Google Pay app, mandatory.
Wait, so no more text message saying you have a payment request, you have to see the pop-up inside the app.
That's the change they rolled out. The idea perhaps was to keep everything neatly inside the app experience.
Okay, and this change went out to everyone.
Globally.
Yes, a full rollout.
And I bet I know what the data showed next.
You probably do. The smoking gun data showed a significant drop in users actually clicking on or interacting with these new mandatory pop-ups after the release. So people just weren't seeing them, or they weren't working right.
That's the strong implication. The new system, designed to maybe streamline things, was actually failing. Users weren't getting notified effectively within the app or couldn't find the requests easily and therefore weren't completing those merchant payments.
Bingo. So the 10% drop boils down to this UI change, this new notification widget system not working as intended.
That appears to be the most likely culprit based on the investigation. It wasn't some deep technical failure in payment processing or competition stealing users en masse, but a problem with how users were being prompted to complete a specific type of payment.
Fascinating. Such a specific cause for a significant drop. So the immediate next step for the Google Pay team seems pretty clear then.
Absolutely. Fix the pop-up. Investigate why users aren't seeing it or interacting with it. Is it a bug? Is it a design issue? That becomes priority number one.
And only if fixing that doesn't solve the 10% drop would they need to dig deeper into other potential server issues or funnel problems.
Exactly. Address the most likely cause first, based on the evidence.
Wow. So this deep dive really walked us through a methodical process, starting broad with external factors, then narrowing it down systematically using data about user behavior and internal changes.
It really shows the value of that structured approach, doesn't it? ruling things out, following the data, asking the right clarifying questions. You don't just jump to conclusions.
And the big takeaway here, wrapping up, is pretty striking. This major 10% payment drop wasn't some huge external crisis or fundamental system breakdown.
No, it seems to have stemmed from a change in the user interface, those mandatory in-app widgets replacing SMS notifications, a specific product decision.
It's a real lesson in how even changes made with good intentions, maybe aiming for a cleaner user experience, can backfire badly if the execution isn't perfect or if user adoption isn't monitored closely.
Absolutely. It highlights the critical importance of, rigorous testing, phased rollouts maybe, and definitely keeping a close eye on metrics after a change goes live. Unintended consequences are always a risk in complex systems.
For sure. And it makes you think, doesn't it? For you listening, consider how many apps and services you use every day that rely on notifications, push notifications, in-app messages, emails, texts.
Yeah, they seem simple, but they're often crucial links in the chain.
What happens when those little prompts fail? How much friction does it add? We saw here how a hiccup in a notification system could potentially impact a major payment platform significantly. It's that delicate dance between technology and how we actually use it.
Definitely food for thought. How robust are the notification systems we rely on?
Something to ponder. Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive. Hope you found that journey through the investigation useful. Until next time, keep thinking critically.